Milton Erickson, you know who he is? He was one of the most well-known therapists. He did something called one-stop therapy. He could literally help people like in one session. And people couldn't believe how he did this. Like he could even cure phobias in one session. So they went in and they were like, how does this guy get things done so fast with people? And they studied him. Well, most people would study somebody like him, would say, well, he said this, so, and then the patient or the client said that, so he said this and they said that, and they would kind of go back and forth. They didn't do that. They studied it very intensely. The breathing pace that he had compared to his patients and clients, the blink rates, the way that he spoke. He had things like embedded commands that he didn't even know he was using, but he was using. He would say things like, you, like me, enjoy the outdoors. And he would embed the command, like me, right there. It's amazing. And he was very good speaking subconsciously and consciously. Now, we all have a tendency to know how to do some of these things, but we don't know how to harness them. They studied it very, very intensely. And NLP is an amazing thing, coupled especially with hypnosis, which I was also certified in. Now, my use of these is nothing. I find them to be not very useful. They're interesting. They're psychologically interesting. I think that used the wrong way, they're manipulative. Used the right way, they're not necessarily manipulative because you do it anyway. You know, when you speak with authority, you're using embedded commands. You know, you're doing these things anyway. Those two things basically provide a conscious direction at it. In fact, when you're listening to music, the music will sometimes hypnotize you. When you drive, you've had highway hypnosis, right? You're like, get there and you're like, oh my gosh, I wasn't even thinking about it, okay? So hypnosis isn't a good or bad thing, and we enter into it, and it can be a useful thing. In fact, if somebody's like kind of guiding you through meditation, it's a hypnotic type of a state in many ways. Now, the direction and the order of the hypnosis of where you're going, and you don't say like, I'm going to go hypnotize with God, okay? But you end up kind of moving into this particular place that's quite effective because you're allowing your unconscious mind to get all sorts of work done while you're in that state, okay? But I don't do them or I don't use them because they're not necessary. That's the reason that I don't, is because these things are way more necessary than those are, and they help you build into something else. But in psychology, when people do therapy, and you are a therapist, not clinically, not certified, whatever, although I will tell you, and I don't mind saying this, even if people have been educated, and most of them are horrendous at their jobs because they're so low virtue, non-wise, imprudent, stupid people that all they do is hurt their people. They wreak havoc on relationships and destruction in people's lives that is so unbelievably bad, they would have been way better off just staying with whatever problem they had and not talking to that person. And I've seen this personal destruction of human beings at the guided hand of therapists in so many different ways. Now, I've also seen the opposite. But the opposite ones use these things. It's interesting. There is some interesting thing, though, about the way that people go about therapy. One of the ways that they do it is kind of regressive. They go back into the past and they really dive into it. I do not have a wholesale opinion as to whether or not that is bad or good. I have a generalization about it. And in general, it's not good. There are certain circumstances where you have to go back to the core of something and wrestle it down in order to heal. There's a reality in that. You might have gone through it in your life at some point, right? But the fixation on that is a very, very, very bad thing, okay? It would be like, going on a first date and saying, I'd like to begin the date by talking about all of the pain and suffering you've gone through and the abuse you've faced and the people who've died in your life. That is just and let's stay on that. No, how about not? Okay? You have to move past that. Therapists who move forward do much better. Our past is our past. Yours, mine, everyone's. Why is it that some people have post-traumatic stress disorder and some people have post-traumatic growth order? It's actually true. It's a real thing. It's why some people face abuse when they're young and they become abusers, but other people become the antithesis of abusers. They become remarkable, and they both went through the same type of experience. What is that happens? One of the things that needs to take place is a forward focus. So again, I'm not saying if you're talking to somebody who's helping you work through the past, this is a condemned or bad thing. I'm saying that to whatever proportion it's being done, it can keep you fixated on the wrong thing. Okay? Some people never need to go back there and they can heal and do really well. Some people have to taste it a little bit to reconcile and then move forward mostly for forgiveness, by the way. Usually when you're going back into that space, it is to recognize the harm for the purpose of forgiveness and nothing more. And if you go back, can you spend more time on it other than what is required to gather enough to forgive? You can't move forward. And that's the fixation, is they keep bringing you back, making you re-experience the pain without letting go of it. Okay? But now you move forward, and when you move forward, you move in an interesting place. Does anybody know the name Martin Seligman? Martin Seligman, for those people who went through psychology, you would know him. He was at Penn as a professor, but he was also voted the president of the American Psychological Association at the end of the 1990s. And I started following him back then. And he, as all people when they're in charge of this, get grant money to study certain things. And he wanted to study something that had never been studied by psychology before that he called positive psychology, which is not to be confused with just having a positive attitude at all. So here, this will help you understand what it means. Before that time, the only thing that they really knew, psychology knew, was neurosis, psychosis. It could tell you how to be sick and what sick people did, but not really what healthy people did. And he's like, that doesn't make sense if we're going to help people become healthy, that we examine why they're healthy. Did you know that Freud did not at one time ever study or work with a faithful Orthodox Catholic? That was something that he did not do. So he didn't have access to what that would mean or even bring. Okay? And so a lot of these perspectives are on a faulty foundation that people have. And so forward thinking is about what makes people healthy. And do you know why psychology psychology threw out God? You know that for a while. And even Nietzsche, when Nietzsche said God is dead, this can be misinterpreted when he said that and interpreted accurately. It's misinterpreted when people go, oh, well, he was horrible because, of that statement. Well, half of the statement was horrible, which is, he was an atheist and whatnot, and that was bad, and he ended up dying insane. But the part that was good was he was making the point that society killed God. And in killing God, we are going to have a big problem. When you take God out of society, it's like even the most atheists want at least Western culture that was Christianized, okay? And because it provides for a good life. And that part of his statement was actually a very real thing, and he was somewhat prophetic in what he was able to recognize as we went through the 20th century of all sorts of death. So when we consider this idea of forward thinking, I consider Martin Seligman's work to be the most significant in it because he studied what healthy people did. And you know what came and shocked them? See, the psychological community threw out God. God can't be an answer. The soul can't be a part of this because it means that their work is less palpable for them to manipulate. And it means they have less control over things. So it's just psyche. That's it. And there's not even really a mind as much as a brain to a lot of these people. And it evolved from apes, so it's not even that important. And, might as well work on it to get the most of it, I guess, for a short period of time while you're here. It's a very different mentality than to fully understand it for its richness. And Martin Seligman, who I think is Jewish, not Christian, discovered that the number one thing that healthy people had was virtue. That was the number one thing that he had. And among the things that he listed were things like wisdom, which is prudence, and humility was a huge one. And so if you want to be healthy, you need to be virtuous. That's pretty fantastic. So how do you optimize your personality? How would you think about it? If you're super excessive conscientious, you're going to be like a dictator who rules the world. You pull that back with virtue and you aim it at the right things, and you're going to build great things. Great things. You are too open, that's a problem. You need virtue to pull you back. Wisdom, prudence, fortitude, temperance, self-control. All these things, they regulate it and bring it back. Forward thinking is one of the tools that I'm talking about. Because you might be like, I'm working on prudence, I'm working on this, I'm doing that, I'm trying to optimize my personality, but I keep going backwards into the past and thinking about the past and how I've been harmed and how I'm victimized and how I'm so special. I'm very special. And I'm very unique. I'm remarkable. I've been hurt so much, and you haven't. In fact, I would get in shape, but I can't because of my specialness. I knew somebody who told me this, who I knew well enough 100% to know fully their medical history. I'm special. I can't work out because I'm allergic to it. To which I laughed because I thought they were making a joke. And they go, no, I'm serious. And I said, you're allergic to it? What are your symptoms? Well, when I work out, I breathe heavy. And then sometimes if I do it hard enough, my lungs burn. And then I sweat. And like the next day or two, I'll be sore. I said, do you know that everyone on planet Earth has those symptoms to exercise, not like me. It doesn't feel like it does like it feels for me. I know that. That is how special they were. And they remained special their whole life. Okay? That is so absurd. But people do that. And this person was not having it that wasn't real. They fully convinced themselves through self-justification that that's the way it is. Okay? But we draw back on the past in different ways. Move forward. You have to move forward. When you move forward, you can do great things. So you know what you want to do? You want to write the last chapter of your story. What's the last chapter of your story? What does that look like? Write it out. Take time and write this out. Oh my gosh. What is the last chapter? Born from wonderful parents who were totally healthy and had amazing money, who raised me in a beautiful way, who had no pain and died, and I just continued. Is that your story? Or is your story like a tragedy with no good end? I have a little addiction right now. I know it. I know that. I used to tell my kids, I said, listen, you made a bad choice. There are two paths. You just went this way. But when you did that, you stepped, and one foot's still on the good path, but the other one just moved to the bad path. And you're like on skis that are about to spread. And if you make the next decision, you're going to have to step all the way here if it's bad, and you're going to get further away. Right now, you can just make an easy step. And there are a lot of people, they step, till they get so far they can barely see that side. Don't do that. Move forward and think the right way. But what's your story right now? What trajectory are you on? My dad came home one time. He was a man of few words. If he spoke, you should listen, though. Great man. Greatest man I've known. And he said to me, and he was mad about work, man. He was mad about work. And he didn't ever talk about his work. Never talked negatively, but he never really talked about it. And I knew what he said to me had nothing to do with me, but everything to do with work. And he said, I got to tell you, he comes in, and he didn't raise his voice. He never did. Well, actually, he did. I caused it a few times. I have an amazing talent for getting that out of a guy like a father when I was a teenager. But he said, I need to tell you something. And I said, what? And he goes, and I was about to graduate from college. He goes, when you graduate from college, you're 21, you can live the same year over, 21 years from now, be the same person and act the same way, or you can intensify your life and seek out goodness and wisdom. And in 5 years, you can be wiser than most people are by the time they're 40. That's your choice. And he walked away. And I was like, I'm just watching a show, but okay. And I never forgot that. And you know what? He doesn't remember doing it. It's interesting. He doesn't remember that, but I remember it.